It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Sisko's looking at landscapes. This particular one's a bit special, as it's a part of Bajor he saw while visiting recently and was struck by the urge to build a home there. That's why he bought it. Quite the change of heart from when he first came here and didn't want the job, thinks Cassidy, but things don't always turn out how you'd planned, doubly so when you discover you're part god. To the Replimat we go, where Dax is telling O'Brien and Bashir about bumping into one of Jadzia's old partners. Bugger all of that though, because Kira has news about another one. A ship Worf was captaining has been destroyed, and he wasn't among the escape pods that Martok, husband of Cirella, was able to find in his own ship. The Defiant goes to take a more thorough look, only for Sisko to call Dax a few days later and say he's abandoning the search. Some Jem'Hadar have taken an interest in him, and Sisko's either forgotten his ship has a sneaky bastard mode, or he can't use it in the Badlands where Worf's ship was destroyed. Either way, Sisko's coming home empty-handed. He probably could have stayed a while longer. Damar Dawson Biggs wants their ships to pursue the Defiant, but 7th Uncle Wayoon the Creepy overrules him. Such things are starting to take a toll on Damar Dawson Biggs, it seems, as he's taken to the bottle while complaining about Cardigan casualties. Perhaps he's also worried about just how stable the Dominion itself is. He's not seen Odetta Olivia Cromwell, Lord Protector of the Dominion, for days, and is curious about just how healthy she might be. We'll leave them to bicker and check on Dax instead. She's gone to Worf's quarters, and it looks like one of the perks of being a widower is that you get to keep the larger rooms. Random items spark memories of Jadzia, all of which serve to make Dax conclude that she should probably go and find the silly bastard. Sisko arrives back at the station to news from Kira that Dax and a mega shuttle are both missing. He gives Dax a call to go through the motions of trying to order her back to the station, plausible deniability being a useful thing in official reports, then gives her a copy of the places they've already looked, to make her job easier. Dax has had an idea. All the escape pods from the right side of Worf's kaboomed ship were recovered, but none from the left. The computer doesn't know why, but says they'd have ended up in the Badlands, where they'd have been caught by space tides or some shit, so Dax shuts down the mega shuttle and rides them herself. Why look when you can just follow? Back on Deep Space Nine, Sisko's trying to keep himself busy as a distraction from worrying. A model of the house he intends to build does the job nicely, as does proposing marriage to Cassidy. Seems a bit overkill on the distraction front to me, but she's fine with it, so they get engaged. To the mega shuttle once more, where Dax's plan has panned out. She's found an escape pod, this place presumably being an area where currents deposit things, as it's been at least 3 days by this point. The occupant proves to be both alive and who we're looking for, which is rather handy, and Worf's got the good grace to not press the matter when he finds out Dax is here against orders. Maybe it's because he's distracted by things being a little awkward between them. As they fly back home, we'll check on Odetta Olivia Cromwell. Things are going rather badly for her, it seems, and the rest of Founder kind by extension. 7th Uncle Wayoon reports a lack of progress on finding a solution, so she orders the research team to be executed and replaced with their clones to help motivate them. Things aren't much better on the mega shuttle. Attempts at conversation by Dax have been largely rebuffed, which is understandable when you consider she's talking about stuff she remembers from Worf's dead wife. The start of an argument is interrupted by Jem'Hadar ships turning up. Scarpering's not an option, so as the mega shuttle gets some blue pooped at it, Worf aims for the nearest planet. The Jem'Hadar ships stop before entering the atmosphere, as they're not designed for it, but they've already done enough damage. Dax and Worf emergency teleport away with backpacks and weapons just before the mega shuttle adds itself to the tally of lost ships. The good news of being alive is swiftly shat on by learning that neither of them thought to grab a portable phone before leaving, which means they may be here for a while. Sisko and Cassidy are organizing their wedding. Their plans for a small, low-key gathering are utterly destroyed by learning the news has escaped containment and all of Bajor eagerly awaits the event. It's not every day that the emissary of the prophets gets married. There are unexpected bumps in the road back on Cardassia too. Damar Dawson-Biggs is complaining about 7th Uncle Wayoon when he receives a visitor. Seagull cuts back after the unfortunate oopsie with his cult on Empok Nor, though the setback hasn't affected his faith in the Parathes a single jot. He has another idea, and one for which he needs the help of Damar Dawson-Biggs, and his discretion. The newest inhabitants of planet Shipwreck are experiencing their share of problems too. Worf's had his fill of rations and decided to go hunting, a choice frowned upon by Dax. Murderizing the local fauna isn't exactly in keeping with non-interference, though Worf thinks Jadzia would have been up for it. That sparks a whole new argument, and it runs for a good while now there are no Jem'Hadar to stop them. Learning Ezri Dax had dinner with one of Jadzia Dax's former partners is the annoyance cherry on Worf's frustration cake, and the ensuing ding-dong becomes a little handsy when Dax tries to swing for him. It becomes handsy in a very different way when Worf catches her and kisses her, and they both get down to a bit of the old dirty little bastard. It's left up to the viewer to decide if they moved the dead animal first. They're having a lovely cuddle next to the low embers of the campfire afterwards when a pair of Breen show up and poop white at them both. They awake on a very different floor indeed, one behind a pair of locked doors. Being captured by the Breen doesn't make any sense to Worf, as they're not involved with the current Dominion Barney, and their space is a fair distance away to boot. Regardless, a bit of shaking tells Worf that they're now on a Breen ship. We'll leave them to get comfortable and return to Cardassia. Damar Dawson-Biggs is with 7th Uncle Wayoon, though his mind is elsewhere. Being called away has 7th Uncle Wayoon assume that he's off to meet a woman. What he finds in his quarters is something very different indeed. Seagull Ducat has had a little cosmetic work done, courtesy of an arrangement by Damar Dawson-Biggs, and he's now ready for the next stage of his new plan. Sisko's fiddling with the model of his future house on Bajor. The prophets have little interest in such things though, which is why they choose now to have a chat with him. It's his mum this time, or the prophet who was possessing his mum when he was conceived at least. She says Sisko's destiny is for him alone, and this whole marriage to Cassidy business doesn't have any place in it. He rebels at this idea and tells her to go do one. It's his life after all, and he can do what the hell he wants with it. Not quite, says Prophet Sarah, as it's the life she gave him, which serves to prove prophets can be possessive parents in more ways than one. She tells him being with Cassidy would result in a very bad time indeed, and that he needs to do what he's bloody well told. He's farted back out of the vision with another command to fulfill his destiny, so we'll leave him to wonder if he's just wasted his money buying some land on Bajor, until the next part of our last adventure. That faint noise you can hear in the background is the sound of Deep Space Nine's final story arc spooling up to full speed. Realizing that they had a whole shitload of things to tie up before the end of the series, those behind the scenes decided to go as close to full serialization as they were allowed. The result is an episode where we have a whole lot of things left hanging without any to be continued at the end, and that leaves us with a problem for how to judge it. For all of my complaints of episodes being largely self-contained, it's a lot easier to tell if something was good when you know the story's done once the credits roll. We'll leave those particular judgments until things start wrapping up then, and instead switch to the topic of a long-running club for the series. With the refrain of "I gave you life," we welcome Benjamin Sisko himself to the Deep Space Nine Shit Parent Support Group. To be fair, having no fewer than 3 different mums meant we were rolling more dice for him, but Prophet Sarah proves to be the weak link here. "I gave you life" is a refrain of shit parents the world over. It essentially translates as, I made a decision that you didn't ask for or have any input towards, and now you owe me forever. You wouldn't even be here without me, you ungrateful little bastard. Now do as you're bloody well told and stay on the path. A very deep and heartfelt fuck you to any parent who uses this broken logic as a means of manipulating the behavior of their offspring. If the only argument you have to promote a course of action is invoking a fictional preconception debt, then you don't have an argument. You have a form of psychological abuse. Let's put all of that negativity to one side though, shall we, and view it through the lens of the prophets. We've asked ourselves a few times now just how much control the prophets are willing to exert over corporeal life forms. We know, for example, that Bajorans have previously asked the prophets whether certain romantic matches are meant to be, though we don't have compelling proof of how they actually answer. We know Kira and Shakar split up as the result of just such a query, but not what was said during the vision. Was the message sufficiently nebulous that those receiving it will simply fill in the blanks with the conclusions they've already drawn? So how much of that applies to the other visions the prophets have given? Stepping back, does the very concept of manipulation even apply to the prophets? Can beings who live outside of linear time, without a full grasp of the concepts of cause and effect, really have accusations of manipulation laid at them? For all we know, a prophet only understands what is and what is not. Chance may have no meaning. Except that's not quite right, is it? We know they grasp the concept of alternatives. Prophet Sarah says Sisko being with Cassidy will bring him nothing but sorrow, which implicitly requires an understanding of multiple outcomes. So the question of whether this qualifies as manipulation depends largely on how the prophets view what they refer to as the path, that particular line of fate they consider true. If they view alternatives to be not simply forbidden but outright impossible, then their actions cannot be manipulation or even necessarily correction, but merely the fulfillment of a truth that has always existed. Put into more simple terms, do the prophets perceive reality as a jigsaw puzzle, a preordained image with pieces that each have a set place? If so, then telling Sisko where he needs to be is not manipulation. It's the only correct solution. Let's leave the thorny issue of free will as unresolved as it always will be, and move on to some nitpicking instead. For a start, I'd like to take issue with the diagram we're shown when Dax arrives at the last known location of Worf. The Megashuttle's computer tells us the starboard side pods were recovered, but none from port. Problem 1 is that port means left, which is the side facing away from the Badlands. Problem 2 is that the direction of pod travel shown is straight forward from the centre of the vessel. Now, we could argue the escape pod launches straight up before cutting out, which means it'll just follow the same trajectory as the ship until affected by something else. The issue with this is that schematics published in the Bird of Prey Owner's Manual show the escape pods to be on the sides of the ship rather than dorsal, so they'll fire at around 20 to 30 degrees off the tangent of travel. I'll grant you these schematics are for the Burrell-class Bird of Prey rather than a Cavort-class Bird of Prey, but that's all I've got, and the silhouettes suggest they're basically the same ship at different scales. All of which should never have even needed touching upon to begin with, because having a diagram that shows the pods being fired straight into the Badlands was both the easiest and most obvious solution. It's certainly what was suggested by the script. The whole thing feels like a basic miscommunication between writers and artists, with the latter under the impression we needed to show the whole ship drifting into the Badlands. The result feels like a fudge at best. It's not the only minor oopsie on this one, though. Those paying attention to Pips will note that Dax promoted herself to full lieutenant when she nicked the Megashuttle. She gets a demotion again before picking up Worf, so today's thought experiment down in the comments is to tell me what shenanigans happened during the journey which resulted in her losing a rank. Let's end today's analysis with a line that sent me into my own thought experiment. When Sisko and Cassidy are talking about who would officiate at their wedding, Cassidy says, "My mother would prefer for her daughter to be married by a minister." We so rarely hear mention of human religion on Trek that some viewers believe it's simply not a thing anymore. This isn't actually true, and we do have a few examples of religious practices or holidays still being observed by some humans, but they're rare enough to be a relatively small list. The general impression seems to be that it's not a large aspect of society anymore, or at least one that's not quite as vocal as it is now. And that leads us to the wider question of how relevant religion is in future ceremonies, things that for most of human history have been associated with deities of one form or another. Will we still have situations where people who are either atheist or not particularly devout will opt for a church wedding purely for the pageantry of it all? Personally, I find it fun to consider these things and to contemplate how a seemingly unimportant line could tie into the wider universe. And the question of how historically religious events fit into a society largely focused on science and progress is very interesting indeed. A single word in this episode left me wondering if Earth would still have graveyards, for example, and whether such things would be attached to places of worship in the future. In short, how strong is the pull of tradition in a society that now looks forward, and perhaps even more interestingly, what would we put in its place? End of episode.
Did you get anything nice for Christmas?
A couple of new books for the library. What about you?
I got a load of...
Excuse me?
What's up, son?
Well, shouldn't we be doing the story?
Nah, mate, it's first day back at work. You're supposed to half-ass it.
Absolutely. The guy who makes these took a whole week off, so he's not got a leg to stand on.
Oh. Fair enough then, carry on.
Anyway, I got a load of...
Should I throw in a joke about pornography?
You what?
You know, just to keep them entertained.
I mean, I wouldn't bother personally.
Yeah, you should save it for the next one.
Well, if you really think that's best.
As I was saying, I got a load of...
What about goatsy or something?
Oh, for fuck's sake, let's just go back to work, shall we?
There's always one who spoils it. Woof.